Journalist, nurse, interpreter, social worker. Jack Bee Garland had half a dozen names and a dozen different lives as he crisscrossed cultural and gender boundaries at the turn of the 20th century in the American West. Welcome back to Yesterqueers. My name's Amanda, and I'm a public historian of queer history. Nepantla is a Nahuatl word that means liminal space or state of transition. It is also an ancient indigenous Mexican philosophy that views the arc of history not as a single thread, but as a great cloth woven from energy, both positive and negative. Chicanic scholar Dr. L. Heidenreich says in their book, Nepantla Squared, that Nepantla is key to understanding our past and present. Unless we can understand the time of motion change in which we live, we risk total subjugation by global capital. Gender, space, and time are indeed part of a great weave. This was the book where I learned about Jack Bee Garland and the ways in which he embodied multiple genders, multiple cultures, and the rapidly shifting definition of what it meant to be an American at the turn of the 20th century. Just a note that I will be using he, him pronouns throughout this video for clarity, but Garland's gender was not so easily defined. Garland was born December 9, 1869 in San Francisco, California as Elvira Mugarieta. His father, Jose, was a highly decorated Mexican army officer who served as Mexico's first consul to California. And his mother, Eliza Garland, was the daughter of a wealthy Louisiana congressman who basically made his money by stealing land from Tejanos after Texas became a state. Heidenreich notes that Garland's family was both interracial and bicultural. His father made sure that all of the children spoke both English and Spanish and that they were comfortable in both cultures. So perhaps it's not surprising that Garland had a similarly fluid experience of gender. As a child, Garland was described as a tomboy, friends with all of the neighborhood boys. And he first started wearing boys' clothes because it was easier to ride horses in pants than in dresses. His family and his community didn't seem to have strong feelings about his fashion choices, but they did send him to Catholic school to make sure that he socialized properly with young ladies. Though Garland had a loving and supportive family, he also had a pretty difficult childhood and adolescence. His father didn't earn a regular paycheck as a consul, so the family was constantly strapped for cash. And then Jose died when Garland was just 17. His brother William was sentenced to 5 years in San Quentin for an instance of petty theft, and then died of tuberculosis shortly after being released following the family's petition to lessen his sentence. And when Garland himself was 19, a judge sentenced him to the State Asylum of California in Stockton. He was allegedly sent there for opium addiction, but this is a time when women, gender nonconforming people, and especially people of Mexican descent were being declared insane for everything from reading trashy novels to being too religious, so it's hard to say what the context of his incarceration actually was. Garland was released after only a month in good health and with no sign of insanity, according to the attending physician. By 1897, Garland was living on a houseboat on McCloud Lake in Stockton, California, and going by the name Babe Bean. He was working as a reporter for the Stockton Evening Mail and pretending to be mute, presumably because he thought that his voice would give away the fact that he'd been assigned female at birth. He was arrested for cross-dressing in September of that year anyway, but was released because he freely admitted that he was a woman wearing men's clothing. At the time, in Stockton, it was only illegal to wear clothing of the opposite gender for the purpose of committing a crime. So technically, it was legal for Garland to wear men's clothes and do men's work as long as he admitted it. Garland knew exactly where the line was, and he danced down it with the skill of a tightrope walker. Stockton's reaction to Garland ranged from curiosity to outright hostility. And as Heidenreich writes, while Garland adopted male attire and engaged in male labor, the press attempted to use the language of empire to claim Garland as a racialized feminine body who, like the heroines of their dime store novels, might wear pants but also had the desirable features of dark hair and a full mouth that would justify conquest and containment. But Garland could not be conquered or contained. On October 5th, 1899, using the name B.B. Beam, he took work as a cabin boy on the City of Para, which was a ship transporting U.S. troops to the Philippines for the Philippine War. He got caught cross-dressing, got kicked off the ship by the captain, got snuck back onto the ship by several crew members, and eventually made it to the Philippines, where he continued to present himself as a man and worked as both a nurse and a Spanish interpreter. He returned to the U.S. after a year and wrote a piece for the San Francisco Examiner about his time as a woman soldier in the Philippine War. Now, just to be clear, he never enlisted and he never saw combat, but that's how Garland marketed his story. He took his mother's maiden name after returning from the Philippines, formally becoming Jack Bee Garland, and turned his attention away from journalism in order to devote his time to social work. This is also the point at which he seems to have started living full-time as a man and being perceived specifically as a white man. Unfortunately, we don't know a lot about the last 30 years of Garland's life. He seems to have done extensive work with the American Red Cross. He was a Red Cross accredited nurse following the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. And at some point, he also lived in Seal Beach, California, because he was arrested there during World War I under suspicion of espionage. He was not, as far as we know, a spy. During the last decade or so of his life, Garland was back in San Francisco, where he walked the streets at night, visiting with homeless men and youth and handing out what few dollars he had to spare. Homeless youth knew him only as Uncle Jack. Garland was out making his usual rounds on the evening of September 18th, 1936, when he collapsed at the corner of Post and Franklin Streets. He died in the hospital the next day, and his birth sex was revealed during his autopsy, at which point it became front-page news. Garland's sister Virginia, as well as one of his friends, both told the press that Garland was a woman who cross-dressed because it was easier to go out into the streets and do community work while wearing pants and presenting as a man. But many queer historians have pushed back on this. Author and activist Lou Sullivan wrote in his biography of Garland, he dressed and lived as a man in order to be a man among men. But I think that oversimplifies Garland's life. In my opinion, Heidenreich gets closest to the truth when they describe Garland as embodying Nepantla. That's it for today. As always, more information, including sources and further reading, is available in the usual place.